Chevy Vortec V8 oil leak spots. Here's every single one. So we're gonna be looking at a 2006 Chevy Silverado 1500 two-wheel drive. Cat's Eye Chevrolet. All right, so it's a Vortec 4.8 V8, same as a 5.3, 6.0, and a little bit like the 8.1. Down in here, there's a front crankshaft seal. It can leak, but I don't really have many problems with the front crankshaft seal. It's the rear one that causes all the problems. But the front one is really easy to replace. Just pull the front crankshaft pulley off and you can swap the seal out. So we got our valve covers, one on this side, and then obviously one on this side because it's a V8. So the valve cover seals on these things, they're just big old O-rings. Here's one right here, you can see what it looks like. They're just flimsy silicone O-rings. They leak a lot, not really that bad, you know, it's just annoying at that point. But these leak all the time. Get in here, swap them out, and you'll notice there'll be a layer of gunk on top of the valve cover. It's because these are leaking. The Felpro ones are the best. They also have these grommets around the valve cover bolts. They go through here. It can leak. All right, so then we have a cap right here. It's got an O-ring under here. That bad boy can leak. See, there it is. It has an O-ring right there where it screws in to the top of the motor, the valve cover right here. So here's the valve cover right here. If we go in the back right there, there is the PCV valve. We got the PCV valve back in there. Now they updated these valve covers. This technically isn't an oil leak, but if you're watching this and you got one of these trucks, it's got an older engine in it, 2007, earlier, basically all of them, it's got a valve cover on there. It was bad design, they updated it. Here's the old design right here. This thing would suck oil through the PCV valve and go right into the engine. And it'd gunk up the intakes, drive you crazy. Every oil change, you'd have to get in there, clean that intake out. There's an updated valve cover, fixes this problem. All right, so here's a valve cover right here. So you can see what I'm talking about. This one's got a big old hole right here, and right here. They lead to the PCV valve right there. That updated cover, it's got this all blocked off. It's got a little hole right here, and it makes it way harder for the oil to get back here to the PCV valve and sucked into the intake just like this. So you gotta get that updated cover. It'll stop the engine from using oil. Not technically an oil leak, but it causes a problem. It's got a grommet around it, it can leak. All right, go back up in here. You got your camshaft position sensor. Here it is right here. So here's the camshaft position sensor located on the back of the engine right here. Camshaft position sensor can leak. It's got an O-ring around it. Don't see it very often, but if it leaks, you can get in there, swap the O-ring out, or just swap the whole thing out. There's the O-ring I'm talking about. Goes right in there like that, seals up. And also, if we look back up in here, you got your oil pressure sensor. You got your oil pressure sensor in the back. Here it is right here. Some of them have a crush sleeve around them. Some of them, I think they have an O-ring around them. But either way, they leak. You can get in there. If it leaks, swap it out. So then on the top of the engine here, you have a valley plate cover. This has a big old seal around here. It goes all the way around here. It can leak. Then down in here, you have knock sensors. They got an oil seal behind them. They rarely leak, but they get all nasty, rusted, and corroded like this, and they don't work. Then this is more of an internal leak, but you have your valves right here, and under the rocker arms, under the spring, and there's a valve seal right there. It can leak. Then of course you have your head gasket here, has some oil ports on it. These don't typically leak, you know. They do pretty good. I hadn't really had many problems with these, you know, getting oil in the coolant, but it can happen. That's pretty much it for topside right here. Let's go under the truck and take a look at it. All right, so this is another one of the most common leak points right here. It's an oil cooler block-off plate up in there. Some of them had oil cooler lines. They go from here to the radiator and they cool the engine oil, bring it back. These things leak like crazy. It does leak. It's just a gasket up under there, you swap it out. Probably one of the most common leaks too. You can see the oil pan gasket needs to be swapped out on this one. The oil pan gaskets on these trucks leak all the time. It's easy on a two-wheel drive, difficult on a 4x4. Two-wheel drive, there's no front diff in the way. See, there's no diff right here. 4x4, you gotta get in there, drop the front diff to get in there to get to the oil pan. Not fun. So a tip guys don't know is, when you put an oil pan gasket on one of these Vortec engines, it's got the front case half and the rear case half. You gotta put 4 lines of high temp silicone, 2 on the front and 2 on the rear. Right here, here they are. You gotta put it on there. If you don't, It will leak even with a new gasket. Even Chevy recommends this procedure on their brand new gaskets, their OEM gaskets. Gotta do it. So on the corners, there's one right here, there's one right here, and then there's one over here. And then there's another one right here. You can see that oil pan gasket needs to be changed for sure. There's this tiny little O-ring on the oil pickup tube that goes down inside the oil pan and then goes up into the motor, into the oil pump. And this little O-ring on there will get hard and it won't let it seal up properly, so the tube doesn't seal to the engine properly. Get a new one popped on there just like this, and then you'll have way better oil pressure. Rear main seals on these trucks are not fun. You got to pull the engine, you know, pull the transmission. You got to separate them somehow to get up in there, and it is not fun or easy to do. So you'll get a combination leak. You'll get the oil pan gasket, you'll get this oil cooler block-off plate, and then you'll get the rear main seal leaking down here. You can't tell which one it is, so you know you got to do the oil pan gasket, then do this one to see if it's the rear main or not. So when you replace the rear main seals on these trucks, some guys recommend getting a new seal that goes around the back case half, you know, and then they got these little locator tools for the rear main seals. You put it on there and you can kind of locate the whole thing to get it centered up, because if you don't get that rear main seal centered up, guess what? It'll leak. So the rear main seal is behind the transmission right here. You got to split it this way, take it out, or you know, when you pull the motor, you can do it with it out. Under the engine, we have the crankshaft position sensor right here. Here it is. This thing's got an O-ring around it. It can leak. If it does, you can get in there and swap it out. Doesn't leak that often. Of course, you got a seal under here for the oil filter. It can leak. Of course, you got a seal up under the drain plug right here. You can swap it out. So here's a bonus tip right here. 4L60E leak spots. This is where they normally leak, right here around the pan. So these pans leak all the time. They took away the oil drain plug. You gotta buy a new pan. You gotta drill and tap it. Don't recommend that. You can see it's an 06. They got rid of the drain plug right here. So you gotta get a different pan that has a drain plug so you can change it easy. If you wanna change it regularly, you gotta get a pan with a drain hole. These aren't too bad to change at all. Here we are on the abandoned Chevrolet Avalanche. Got in there, got the old gasket scraped off. Got a new transmission pan gasket on there. You can see there are no leaks. They leak from these oil pan gaskets around there the most. You got your rear tailshaft seal. That boy can leak around there, sling oil all over the place. Here you go right here. It is doing exactly as I said. It's slanging oil all over the place. I like to try to get the booted one. It seals a little bit better, keeps the dirt out of there, preserves the life of the seal. And there's a big old O-ring behind here. Sometimes those leak. You can see this one's not leaking. There's a little O-ring right where the torque converter slides on the transmission, right down in there. You gotta swap out that O-ring when you got the motor out or the transmission out, or else it'll leak. And then you got some transmission cooler lines going into the radiator. You guessed it, they can leak. So here's the transmission oil cooler lines right here. They go into the radiator right there, and they help to cool the transmission fluid. What it does is it passes the transmission fluid through the radiator, helps cool it. So the transmission cooler lines are just like an O-ring and a clip. Other than that, these don't leak that often. So that's pretty much all the oil leaks I can think of. Just remember, just because it can leak doesn't mean that it does leak. And if it leaks oil, it's got oil. Which one of these oil leaks is y'all's favorite to fix on these trucks? Later.